Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal 155 based on novel. So let's start. Wealth, the first sword that Wang Lin obtained at the Hengyu sect. It seemed that the moment the youth held that sword, everything in the future had been decided. Hundreds of years of karma flashed by from when he lost it to when he regained it. Wealth contained a soul technique of the previous generation's reigned celestial sword spirit. This soul technique was not a celestial spell, a Dao spell, or even an ability. It was a sword style. A powerful sword style that inherited the ancient sword intent. Wang Lin's held the celestial sword and looked at the formation that the Thunder Beast and Celestial Guard were constantly attacking. When the formation looked like it couldn't withstand another hit, he lifted the celestial sword. The calmness in his eyes were gone and it was replaced with a ray of sword light. At this moment, his entire body merged with the sword in his hand. The celestial sword rose. And it fell. This simple fall caused the heavens and earth to fall into darkness. Even the Celestial Guard and the Thunder Beast seemed to disappear at this moment. In the entire world, there was only this simple fall of the sword. This sword seemed like it was going to open the world, like it was about to tear through the chaos of the world. This sword gave off no sword energy or celestial spiritual energy, but this simple sword would shake the soul of anyone who saw it. The first to react was the Huan family's ancestor. His eyes jerked wide open, revealing a look of shock, and he exclaimed, This is law. It was as if the heavens and earth were being torn apart. This sound of tearing echoed in his mind. The dim heavens and earth seemed like they really were being torn apart. Not only him, but Huan Fengshan sucked in a breath of cold air. A monstrous killing intent came from the sword the moment it fell. The killing intent spread like crazy as it tore through Huan Fengshan's eyes and imprinted in his mind. Huan Fengshan's body suddenly stiffened. This is, Huan Fengshan's mind trembled. It was as if a sword had just pierced between his eyebrows and came out from the top of his head. He subconsciously took several steps back. With his late-stage ascendant cultivation, he wasn't able to see the law of the sword. However, he clearly felt that at the moment the sword fell, it seemed to contain a heavenly law, but even more, it contained the power to tear the heavens. Bang bang, bang bang, bang bang. Huan Fengshan could clearly feel his own heartbeat speed up. He had the illusion that he was going to collapse with the world. All of the Huan family direct descendants that were originally looking at the sky were filled with shock. That simple fall made them feel like they were part of it all, as if the fall of the sword that tore the world apart had torn them apart too. They were immediately covered in cold sweat. With their cultivation, they had no idea why it was like this, why they had such feelings even with the formation protecting them. The other party had simply lowered his sword. The fear of death began spread at this instant. Not only them, even the eyes of Qian Kuizi, who had been watching with his divine sense, shined brightly. He was inside the secret chamber of the Qian family's home, and he suddenly stood up. Law. That sword strike contains law. The pursuit of the second step is law. The first step is understanding the heavens, and the second step is converting that understanding into the power of laws. If this child is not someone from the Thunder Celestial Temple, how could he display such a sword strike? At the same time, a member of the Shu family noticed this scene. An old man from the Shu family was also watching the battle at the Huan family's home with his divine sense. Previously, he had come to an agreement with the Huan family to provide help. He had lifted his foot to leave, but at this moment, he gently put it down. This child's sword style is very strong. Although I'm not afraid of it, since he dared to challenge the Huan family, he must still have moves prepared. The sword fell, and at this moment, all of the sound in the world disappeared. The Huan family's formation collapsed without any real contact or blow landing on it. After withdrawing the sword, Wang Lin's expression was pale. However, his gaze became even colder as he stared at the Huan family below him. The impact the heaven chop had on the body was great, and it had nothing to do with cultivation. It relied on the origin energy from a close integration of the origin soul and the body. An ascendant cultivator's origin soul and origin energy are fused into one. However, The heaven chop can separate a part of that origin energy. An ascendant cultivator only has a fixed amount of origin energy, and once too much is lost, their cultivation regresses. Fortunately, Wang Lin had Ju Yi's ascendant crystal, so he had a bit more origin energy than most cultivators. The Huan family was completely silent. Huan Wuqing's gaze was even more gloomy as he looked at Wang Lin and coldly said, "I underestimated you. To have such a sword style at only the ascendant stage, you are indeed very strong. However, the gap between the first step and second step is too wide. If you had displayed that sword art with second step cultivation, it might have been interesting, but it is useless right now. Today you broke my Huan family's formation, so you will without a doubt die. Please, ancestral jade." The Huan family's ancestor let out a loud shout. A powerful force suddenly came from the Huan family's ancestral home. This force, which was filled with a sense of unity, spread like a celestial wind and surrounded the Huan family. A golden jade slowly floated into the air from a house nearby. This force of unity was coming from this jade. At the moment the jade appeared, it was as if a separate world had been carved out from the planet. It allowed the Huan family's ancestral home to become its own realm. The Huan family's ancestor stared at Wang Lin and revealed a sneer. Unless he had to, he wouldn't personally act, because he was too afraid of Wang Lin's sword energy. Earlier, when he asked Chen Kuizi to help, it was to waste Wang Lin's sword energy. The Huan family's formation was meant to do the same. However, he would never have imagined that Chen Kuizi would actually retreat instead of battling. The family's formation was broken not by the sword energy but by the combined force of the thunder beast, the puppet, and the law from the sword. Now he could only clench his teeth and call out the jade that their celestial ancestor had left them. This jade contained a spell of the celestial ancestor from the thunder celestial realm. The Huan family was able to reach the status they had today because of this jade and a treasure left behind by the celestial ancestor. Huan Wuqing thought, unfortunately, the celestial treasure disappeared along with Huan Wuxiang several thousand years ago. Otherwise, with that celestial treasure, there would be no need to call out the jade. The powerful force from the jade was like a gentle, spring breeze. It also gave off a bright color. After an instant, the jade seemed to melt, then it took the shape of a person. Although one couldn't clearly see the person's features, it gave off a sense of majesty. Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal 157 based on novel. So let's start. Nothing in this world could escape life and death. Sun Tai looked at the father and son before him and revealed a smile. At this moment, he looked peaceful as he burned the last of his life. After hearing Wang Lin's promise, Sun Tai gave Wang Lin a profound look. He deeply ingrained the look of the person he once had a feud with. His eyes blurred and he suddenly felt like he had returned back to several hundred years ago, back in the Rain celestial realm. Various scenes flashed through his eyes before they finally stopped at the calm yet slightly older face before him. The distance between life and death was, in fact, this short. Sun Tai smiled and closed his eyes. At this moment, the deathly aura on his body reached its peak and completely vanished the next instant. Grandpa's son, Wang Ping, shed tears as he looked at Sun Tai's serene face and began to cry. Wang Lin let out a sigh and rubbed Wang Ping's head. His eyes were calm. He had seen through life and death, seen through reincarnation. Such things were like smoke to him. He had seen them, but they wouldn't linger in his heart. Sun Tai's tomb was in the back of the fallen moon village. Everyone who died at the village would be buried there. Wang Ping carved the tomb, and on it he wrote Sun Tai's tomb inscribed by his grandson Wang Ping. When Wang Ping was 12, Sun Tai adopted Wang Ping as his step-grandson. Wang Lin didn't stop him. Sun Tai was, after all, older than Wang Lin and was old enough to be Wang Ping's grandpa. As for the relationship between him and Sun Tai, they were peers. Sun Tai even had a bone-deep respect for Wang Lin, just like Wang Ping felt. Sun Tai's tomb didn't have a body. This body had already become a jar of ashes inside Wang Lin's bag of holding. This was Wang Lin's promise to Sun Tai. The 16-year-old Wang Ping was even more handsome. In comparison to him, Wang Lin looked even older. The passage of time took away Wang Lin's appearance, and along with it went the interest of the village's women in matchmaking for him. However, as Wang Ping grew older, that interest was placed on him. However, Wang Ping was quite like his father. Although he was handsome, he always acted extremely calm. Normally, he didn't say much, but there was a hint of wisdom in his eyes. 1 year after Sun Tai died, Wang Lin was in the courtyard, holding a block of wood and carefully carving. Wang Ping was sitting on the side, calmly looking at this father. His father's face had even more wrinkles and had become even more ancient. Wang Lin didn't raise his head and calmly said, "Carving requires one to put their heart into every stroke. Every stroke needs to be engraved in one's memory. Only then can one be considered a craftsman." Wang Ping nodded. He also picked up a piece of wood and began to carefully carve. Under the sunset, the father's and son's shadows was pulled extremely long. There wasn't much difference in their movements, and even their demeanors were very similar. As the sun set, the figures gradually faded, but the hint of charm seemed to remain eternal. After the sun finally set and darkness covered the earth, Wang Lin lit up the lamp in the courtyard and calmly asked, "Did you finish thinking?" Wang Ping put down the half-finished statue and began to silently ponder. Wang Lin didn't urge him but sat down on the side and picked up Wang Ping's statue to examine it. This statue was slightly rough, but it was able to capture 30% of the charm. The statue was of Sun Tai. He had an arrogant expression as he looked up at the sky. His hands were forming a seal and a strange aura had gathered on his body. There were clouds under his feet, making him look like a legendary figure. Wang Ping lowered his head and whispered, "Dad, why won't you let me study the immortal spells Grandpa's son left behind?" Wang Lin let out a sigh. In the end, Sun Tai still didn't respect his decision on this matter. He had used the fact that he had accepted Wang Ping as his adopted grandson to secretly impart cultivation techniques on him. None of this was hidden from Wang Lin. If it wasn't for Sun Tai trying to impart his cultivation method to Wang Ping, he wouldn't have died 4 years earlier than expected. As a father, Wang Lin wasn't a father to act without consulting others. He looked at Wang Ping. This child had inherited his mother's appearance, but during these 16 years, he had learned his calmness. When Wang Ping's eyes shined with wisdom, Wang Lin felt like he was seeing another version of himself. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze and softly said, "Because the life of a cultivator doesn't suit you." Wang Ping revealed a faint smile as he looked up at his father and said, "Dad, I never cultivated those cultivation methods Grandpa's son gave me, not even once." Wang Lin nodded. He naturally knew all of this. Although Sun Tai had passed on his cultivation methods, in the end, Wang Ping never cultivated them. Wang Ping lowered his head and asked, "Dad, you are immortal too, right?" Wang Lin's eyes revealed vicissitude and he slowly said, "Not an immortal, just a cultivator." Wang Ping silently pondered for a moment and asked, "Dad, do you want me to live an ordinary life and not follow your footsteps in becoming a cultivator?" The moon gradually rose into the sky. When the moonlight fell on the earth, there was a hint of coldness within its gentle light. The gentle breeze caused the lamp to sway back and forth. The fire inside the lamp began to flicker and mix with the moonlight that enveloped the courtyard. Wang Lin put down Wang Ping's statue. He looked up at the sky, and his voice was erratic. "Yes. If Ping is unwilling." Wang Ping raised his head and looked up at his father. This was the first time in 16 years that he had spoken like this to his father. Wang Lin's gaze fell on Wang Ping. He didn't speak but calmly looked at Wang Ping. Time slowly passed by. Wang Ping gradually lowered his head as if he was afraid to look at Wang Lin's eyes. "The cultivator's life is not suited for you. Don't mention it again." Wang Lin's voice was very soft but firm. However, hidden in his eyes, where Wang Ping couldn't see, was a trace of sadness. This sadness was very strong. Wang Ping bitterly said, "Yes, father, I won't cultivate." Wang Lin didn't speak as he turned around and entered the room. At the moment he entered the room, his voice came. "Ping eat your medicine." Wang Ping silently pondered. After a long time, he let out a sigh, got up, and walked into the room. His back looked crestfallen. His father didn't reveal his majesty, but in Wang Ping's heart, It was imparably huge and he was powerless to resist. He could only follow his father's will and live out an ordinary life. Aside from cultivation, I can give you everything else in the world. After Wang Ping drank his medicine and lied down, Wang Lin's voice slowly drifted over. Wang Ping closed his eyes and didn't speak. In the darkness, Wang Lin sat by himself in the courtyard, staring at the darkness before him. Sadness flashed across his eyes once more. The passage of time was like the moonlight in the darkness. You can't see when it will comes, and when you do see it, the moonlight has already landed on the ground. In the blink of an eye, it had been 3 years since Sun Tai died. This year Wang Ping was 19 years old. He had completely become a handsome young man. Although there was still a hint of immaturity on his face, unless one looked closely, it was very difficult to see. His appearance became more and more like Liu Mai's. In contrast, Wang Lin became even older. 19 years of time had left deep marks on his face. On the 19th year after Wang Lin arrived at the Fallen Moon village, he packed up his things and left with Wang Ping. When they left, Wang Ping's childhood friends all came to send them off. Most of them were girls, and their gazes toward Wang Ping were filled with resentment. The eyes of the second daughter from the Zhu family were especially resentful. However, Wang Ping was completely indifferent to all of this. He inherited his appearance from Liu Mai, but he inherited his personality from Wang Lin. He didn't care too much about women. During these 19 years of time, people in the village gave birth and died, a generation was growing old while a new generation was growing up. Compared to when Wang Lin arrived here 19 years ago, 3 or 4 people out of 10 had passed away. The burly man from the Zhu family was still sturdy, but he was obviously not young anymore. He stood beside Wang Lin and sadly said, "Brother Wang, in the blink of an eye, almost 20 years have passed. I still remember you arriving at the village with Ping but now you are going to leave." Wang Lin faintly smiled and softly said, "Brother Zhu, I have been troubling you all these years. However, now that the child has grown up, I need to take him out to see the world." The burly man from the Zhu family sighed as his gaze fell on Wang Ping, who was surrounded by the girls in the village, and wryly smiled. "It looks like my family's second daughter won't have the luck." Wang Lin shook his head and smiled. "It should be my boy who doesn't have the luck." Not far away, Wang Ping's expression was normal as he softly said, "All of you, take care." With that, he returned to Wang Lin. However, one of the girls ran out with a red face and shouted, "Wang Ping, will you return in the future?" Wang Ping stopped. Without turning around, he softly said, "I probably won't." The girl's eyes turned red and 2 streams of tears fell down her face. She seemed to have heard her own heart shatter. "I hate you, Wang Ping." The girl began to cry and ran away. Wang Ping frowned as he arrived next to his father and remained silent. The burly man from the Zhu family let out a sigh. He clasped his hands at Wang Lin and said, "Brother Wang, take care." Wang Lin had a very good opinion of this straightforward man, and he laughed. "Take care." After that, he turned around and walked away. Wang Ping followed a few steps behind before hesitating. He looked back at the girl who was running away and crying, then he let out a sigh and left with Wang Lin. Wang Ping caught up to his father and frowned. "Dad, why are those girls so troublesome? Especially that Zhu Ruotong." Wang Lin laughed as he looked back at Wang Ping. Having inherited Liu Mai's appearance, there was something demonic about Wang Ping's handsomeness. Wang Lin said, with smile that was not a smile, "You don't like the girl from the Zhu family?" Wang Ping sighed. "I don't like her. It's just that, when she was crying, I felt a bit of reluctance in my heart." Although water covered most of planet Ranyun, there was still a lot of mountains and land. Although the catastrophe years ago made the spiritual energy on the planet a lot weaker, it was still slightly better than planet Suzaku. The figures of a father and son always be seen between the famous mountains on planet Ranyun. They were climbing the mountains and standing on the top of the world. They were watching the changes of the earth and the overlapping clouds. The earth had shrunken down a lot. It was as if they could see the end with but a gaze. When they were at the peak, the wind was whistling in their ears. Wang Ping stood at the peak, looking down at the word. It was as if his soul had evolved. As they climbed mountain after mountain, his weak body gradually gained strength. In his eyes, everything about his father was great, whether it was the 19 years of peace, or their current challenge against the world. After crossing peak after peak, Wang Ping's mind expanded greatly. It was as if he had forgotten everything wandering the world. Although the only person accompanying him was his father, the mountains, the water, the sky, and this land seemed to be able to feel his presence and followed him. There wasn't any sense of loneliness, only a freedom of spirit. No matter how dangerous the mountain was, it couldn't stop this father and son duo. No matter how big a mountain was, they all fell under their feet. Although Wang Ping's body was immortal, his heart was molded again and again until it reached a new height. To experience life through the mountains, to calm one's mind through crossing them, and to feel might from crossing over each mountain. However, he should never stop or yield to this might, so he continued to climb over each mountain he faced. He used the body of a mortal to inherit Wang Lin's heaven-defying ideals. Wang Lin didn't impart Wang Ping any cultivation methods, but he used his own method to help refine Wang Ping's mind. Thirsty? Drink some spring water. Hungry? Eat some fruits and wild beasts. Tired? Rest on the ground. Sleepy? Lie down on the earth and the sky will be your blanket. 3 years of time quickly flashed by. During these 3 years, Wang Ping's respect for his father grew even stronger. In his eyes, his father was the most amazing person in the world. After conquering the mountains, the rivers were next. The shadow of this father and son duo would appear across rivers everywhere. They looked at the majestic rivers and listened to the almost heaven-defying roars of the water. A solitary boat held Wang Ping's gaze and gradually evolving mind. As it crossed the river, it continued to push forward and challenge the raging waves. Wang Lin and Wang Ping left their shadows everywhere across this large river that went around most of planet Ranyun. More laughter came from Wang Ping's mouth, and accompanying this laughter was Wang Lin's hearty laughter. This kind of laughter was very rare from Wang Lin. His laughter seemed contagious and made Wang Ping even happier. It was as if as long as his father was by his side, everything would be all right. Father, I will spend my life accompanying you. Even in death, if there is reincarnation, even if we are no longer father and son, I'll never forget you. In the river, Wang Ping's voice was very determined. This solitary boat traveled down the river across more than half of planet Ranyun and headed toward the ocean. The journey on land was over, but the voyage over the sea had just begun. As the ship sailed through the ocean breeze, Wang Ping's world expanded indefinitely. Islands and waves passed by one. He saw heavenly lightning strike down on the surface of the water. He saw a huge whale the size of a village. He even saw a mirage. The sea's vastness was far greater than land. Wang Ping felt that the vastness of the sea was like his father, it seemed to stretch on forever. After integrating with the boundlessness of the sea, the fierceness of the mountain, and the endless extension of the river, he was able to feel the might of the world. When Wang Lin and Wang Ping returned to land 5 years later, Wang Ping had been reborn. Although he was still immortal, his soul accommodated the world. When they returned, the last mountain they crossed was Quillian Mountain next the fallen moon village. The childish nature was completely gone from the 27-year-old Wang Ping's face. Instead, his eyes were filled with determination. During these 8 years of travel, the hint of demonic nature gradually disappeared and was replaced with absolute handsomeness. This sharp and handsome face contained a smile as bright as the sun and even brighter eyes. Looking at Wang Ping, Wang Lin revealed a smile. This journey was a method that Wang Lin had been thinking of for a long time to help Wang Ping completely expel the resentment in his body. Liu Mai's pill and Wang Lin's spell could only eliminate a majority of the resentment, as the resentment was too integrated with his soul. Throughout the 20 years of peace, the resentment gradually eased, and the 8 years of soul evolution allowed Wang Ping to purify his soul. Unknowingly, Wang Ping gradually removed the resentment in his soul until there was only a sliver remaining. This silver was something that no pill or spell could remove. It could only be erased through the reincarnation cycle. Under Quillian Peak, Wang Lin looked at the mountain village far away and asked, "Don't you want to look?" Beside him, Wang Ping shook his head and said, "Not going." Wang Lin didn't speak anymore and stepped toward the mountain's peak. Wang Ping chased after his father and laughed. Father, back when I was a child, I once heard people say that Quillian Peak has celestial clouds. They said that just sucking one mouthful would make me immune to sickness for 10 years. I have always wondered when father would bring me here. Wang Lin faintly smiled and gently looked at Wang Ping. This father and son duo gradually reached the peak of this tall Quillian mountain. Countless clouds floated at the peak. It was as if they were stepping on the clouds. Wang Ping took a deep breath and then looked at his father. Although Quillian Mountain was huge, it couldn't compare to this father. Although Quillian Mountain was tall, it couldn't compare to his father. The cloud in the distance seemed to darken, and there were bursts of lightning and rumbling thunder coming from it. This power of the heavens and earth attracted Wang Ping's gaze. Not long after, the thunder grew louder. A wet wind blew by, followed by rain. As the dark cloud began to spread, the rain began to get heavier. Because it hadn't rained for a long time, the dust on the earth began to float into the air. However, before it flew up too high, it rapidly merged with the falling rain and returned to the earth once more. The dust was just like heaven-defying cultivators that desired to reach the heavens but were put down by the rain. Just like cultivators, how many specks of dust could actually ascend to the heavens? The thunder and rain passed by. The father and son on the mountain peak calmly watched it all. This rain seemed to fall everywhere, but none of it landed on their bodies. Aside from the rumbling thunder and swishing rain, there was no other sound. The thunder and rain came fast and left just as fast. Soon, the cloud dissipated and a rainbow that looked like it was hanging from the sky appeared before the father and son duo. The rainbow was beautiful and colorful. The 7 colors in such close proximity seemed to contain a hint of the heavens' Tao. However, at this moment, this quietness was disturbed by a whistling sound. From a distance, a flying sword whistled by with a thunderous boom, as if it was going to shatter the rainbow when it flew through it. A middle-aged man was standing inside the sword light. This person had the air of a celestial as he stood on the green flying sword that gave off a cold glint. As he flew by, he immediately spotted Wang Lin and Wang Ping at the top of Qilin Peak and was surprised. For a mortal to climb up here was not normal, it required great determination. He revealed a look of admiration but didn't stop. He flew over the mountain and headed into the distance. Wang Ping stared at the middle-aged man until he disappeared over the horizon. This was the first time Wang Ping had seen something like this. This shocked his heart greatly, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. Wang Ping murmured, "Father, is that an immortal?" Wang Lin sighed and slowly said, "Yes." Wang Ping pondered for a long time before he raised his head. He then looked at his father with his bright eyes and softly said, "Father, can I really not cultivate?" Wang Lin's gaze fell on the gradually dissipating rainbow. Deep within his eyes, he revealed a hint of sadness. He didn't speak and only shook his head. Wang Ping didn't speak anymore but stared at where the middle-aged man disappeared. After leaving Quillian Peak, Wang Ping was completely silent. They walked on the main road into a town before taking a carriage toward the big city. Along the way, Wang Ping didn't say a word. Aside from the coachman, there was only Wang Lin and Wang Ping. Wang Lin looked outside, and in his eyes, the sadness became even stronger and there was a hint of unspeakable bitterness. The carriage was completely quiet for a long time. Wang Ping lowered his head and whispered, "Father, I want to cultivate." This was the second time he said he wanted to cultivate. The first time was when 10 years ago, that year he was 17 years old. Wang Lin didn't withdraw his gaze as he kept looking outside and calmly said, "You are not suited for cultivation." Wang Ping looked at this father's silhouette and unwillingly asked, "Father, why?" Wang Lin turned his head. Like 10 years ago, he didn't speak, he only calmly looked at Wang Ping. The sound of the wagon's wheels rolling over things slowly came from the outside and replaced the passage of time. Finally, Wang Ping lowered his head and whispered, "I understand, Father." Wang Lin withdrew his gaze, so Wang Ping couldn't see the sadness in his eyes. No one knew the real reason he wouldn't let Wang Ping cultivate. Sun Tai didn't know, Wang Ping didn't know, only Wang Lin himself knew the real reason. He was unable to tell Wang Ping. For Wang Ping's sake, he couldn't. This had nothing to do with Liu Mai. Wang Ping couldn't hear Wang Lin's sigh. Wang Lin silently pondered as he looked at the wilderness outside. Inside the carriage, Wang Ping was also like this. The silence between the father and son became even stronger. After a long time, Wang Ping turned his head and looked at his father. From the side, his father's face seemed to have even more wrinkles. His heart couldn't stand it anymore and he softly said, "Father, I was wrong." Wang Lin turned around. He revealed a kind smile but didn't speak. Vast Water City was the sub-capital city of one of the three great empires on planet Ranyun, and it was second only to the capital in prosperity. It was also near the river, so it was a very lively city. The carriage entered the city and stopped at a station. Wang Lin and Wang Ping got off the carriage and entered this bustling city. Wang Ping had never seen such a lively and big city. As he looked around, he seemed to forget all the unhappiness from before. Wang Lin stepped into a rather lavish restaurant in the eastern part of the city. The waiter inside the restaurant hurried over with a smile and led the father and son to a table near the window. Not long after, wine and food were brought over. It might have been because Wang Ping's appearance was too handsome, but after he sat down, he immediately caught the attention of a lot of the women in the restaurant. As for Wang Ping, he had long grown accustomed to this during his boyhood back in the village. Wang Lin didn't move his chopsticks, but he picked up the wine and calmly drank. As for Wang Ping, he only tasted the dishes. Wang Lin put down the wine and calmly said, "From now on, we will live here. First we will need to buy a house." Wang Ping nodded and smiled. "Dad, this place is pretty good. After spending so much time on seeing mountains and rivers, I felt like I suddenly entered the world when we came into this bustling city." Just as Wang Ping finished speaking, a sneer came from a table nearby. There were 3 people sitting at that table. One of them was an old man wearing silk who looked very dignified. Although his eyes were dim, when he opened them, he gave off a noble aura. Beside him sat 2 people, one male and one female. The man was very handsome and dignified. He wore a purple robe with golden lines embroidered on it. It looked very expensive. As for the woman, she was about in her 20s with black hair like a waterfall. Although she wasn't an absolute beauty, she gave off a very refreshing feeling. The person who sneered was the man in purple. The man in purple turned toward the woman beside him and laughed. "This silly boy is interesting. It's his first time entering Vast Water City and he starts spouting nonsense, like being accustomed to seeing mountains and rivers and his first time entering the world. Nonsense." He didn't talk loudly, but said it so those words could enter Wang Ping's ears. Wang Ping frowned but didn't say a word. As for Wang Lin, he picked up the jug and drank a mouthful. His gaze seemed to randomly sweep the 3 people at that table. The woman frowned and softly asked, "Is it funny?" The young man laughed. "Junior apprentice sister Qing Yi, why it is not funny?" The woman revealed a trace of annoyance and turned her head. The young man let out a cold snort. The reason he laughed at Wang Ping was because when he entered, this always cold woman actually raised her head and looked at Wang Ping. If not for this woman, how could he eat in a place like this given his status? When he saw her expression, he let out a cold snort, turned around, and stared at Wang Ping. The young man in purple softly said, "If his appearance was born on a woman, she would definitely be an enchanting girl. Unfortunately, it is on a male. Truly unfortunate, but for him to be a prostitute, he'd be pretty good." The repeated provocations made Wang Ping put down his chopsticks. He turned his head to look at the youth and said, "What a good face. If it was born to a person, he would be very handsome. It's a pity it was born to a bastard. What a pity." The young man in purple's expression sank, but before he could speak, the old man next to him frowned and shouted, "Since when could people like this come into the Jingyaxian? No manners at all. Just let this old man teach you a lesson or 2. As the old man spoke, he threw his chopsticks and they flew out like bolts of lightning. He was aiming for Wang Ping's shoulders. If the pair of chopsticks really hit, then Wang Ping's hands would be wasted. At the moment the old man threw the chopsticks, the woman beside them exclaimed. She stood up and was about to chase after the chopsticks. However, at the moment the chopsticks closed in, they immediately lost their strength and softly landed next to Wang Ping. Wang Lin's eyes were cold as he put down the wine and coldly stared at the old man. One glance. The old man's body started as if countless bolts of thunder had exploded in his mind. That gaze was like a sharp sword that pierced into his whole being through his eyes. It broke through his mind and entered his soul. It seemed like it wanted to shatter his soul, extinguish his core flame, and cause his golden core to shatter. The old man's body immediately stiffened as if a powerful bolt of lightning had just struck him. His hands and feet trembled uncontrollably. This is. The old man's mind trembled and his scalp started tingling. There was intense pain coming from between his eyebrows. It was as if a blade had pierced through his skull. The sound of his heart violently beating instantly echoed through the old man's body as if it was about to collapse. His body was covered in cold sweat as if he was about to face an enemy naked. His entire being was about to collapse from this one glance. A stream of blood that contained a trace of gold came out from the corner of his mouth. A crack had appeared in his core and his core energy had leaked into his bloodstream. The old man was a core formation cultivator. As for the young man in purple, he had only started chi condensation, and the woman hadn't reached the foundation establishment stage yet. Since a core formation cultivator could be so unscrupulous and act so viciously against a mortal, Wang Lin showed killing intent without any hesitation. Moreover, this old man had provoked his son. The chair the old man was sitting on cracked and he fell to the ground. His face was pale as he quickly took out pills to swallow and immediately crushed a message jade. The restaurant was completely silent as many guests were still in confusion. However, there were still some clever customers that quickly paid their bills and left. The young man in purple was completely startled. He didn't even look at the old man. Instead, his extremely gloomy eyes stared at Wang Lin and Wang Ping. As for the woman, she was in a complete daze as she stared at Wang Ping and Wang Lin. She never thought that such an event would take place. I don't need you to teach my son. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze, picked up the wine jug, and took a gulp. This video will end here.